Kia ora, it's Chris with Earth Sciences New Zealand with our summer outlook. It is summertime, recording this on the first day of summer and the first day of the month, December 1st. In the afternoon, here is what you need to know. I'm going to disappear. Here are the headlines for the summer season. La Nina is here. But will the summer be like La Nina? A bit of foreshadowing. For some, no. More on that in a minute. And for some, likely a summer with two personalities. So we're thinking second half of summer could be, I guess, significantly or noticeably different than the first half for some. Again, dive into that in just a bit. See, these are the headlines and teasers. I can't give it all away in the first minute. And our oceans are really on fire. Local and regional ocean temperatures are in marine heat wave status. Coming back on screen. That will have likely a profound impact on our temperatures and may very well play a factor when it comes to rainfall, particularly if we get any airflows coming from the north. More on that in a minute. Right, so let's start off with what you need to know, going to the temperature outlook. Keep in mind, as I disappear, we go full frame. This is for the entire season. This is not a 3-day outlook. This is not even a 3-week outlook. This is a 3-month outlook. So we're trying to identify themes and what the, I guess, personality Mother Nature will give us for the next 3 months. And that is above average. We think the best chances for a warmer than average summer going to be the top of the country, the upper North Island. Western North Island, top of the South Island, they too have above average temperatures expected for the summer season, but it's really the upper North Island that has the greatest chance. About a 2 in 3 chance, 65% chance for temperatures to be above average for the summer season. Now, the other locations that I'm pointing to here in the lighter red, eastern North Island, as well as much of the South Island, eastern and western South Island, there's about an equal chance, coming back full screen here, on screen I should say, for temperatures to be average or above average. I think really it's the South Island, these two areas where there's a bit of uncertainty, or that uncertainty is greatest, because there will be some cool periods, especially during December, that may prevent the straight up above average summer season. There will be warm days. Heck, we've already seen many days where temperatures have approached and exceeded 30 degrees. What about rainfall? Again, disappearing for a moment, going full frame. Boy, a bit of a hodgepodge here. Look at this. So the upper North Island, we think if there's going to be a wetter than usual summer, it is going to be in this part of the country. Bay of Plenty, Waikato, Northland, Auckland. This is where rainfall, we're saying, is going to be either normal or above normal. Now, coming back on screen, just so I can pontificate a bit more. Look, December is going to likely start off on a dry note. Now, as I say, I'm recording this on December 1st. It is going to get rather wet for the next few days. But once we get through that, as you'll see in a moment, the month turns actually pretty dry, so it's probably going to have to be the back half of summer where we see that rainfall pick up. And this is that summer of two personalities I mentioned. It could be quite dry for the first 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, sort of 1/3, half of summer for the upper North Island. Could certainly have a distinct dry lean, and then we transition to something a bit more La Nina-like. Now, for the eastern part of the North Island, look, the uncertainty is greatest here. We're saying near normal. I guess near normal is the most likely outcome in terms of rainfall, but we are giving about a 1 in 3 chance, 30% to be precise, for either below normal or above normal. That underscores the uncertainty. Unclear on when that La Nina-like east to northeast type airflow kicks in, and therefore elevating the odds for rainfall events. It's been dry there. We'll talk about that in a minute. For much, in fact, heck, all of the South Island, you can see we're in this tan or this gold coloring. We think dryness could be a concern for the top of the South Island and for the east and west of the South Island. Though the western South Island, there may be a bit of rainfall before we see those east to northeast winds. So December may actually end up being a bit wetter than the rest of the summer season, January and February. And last but not least, the western and lower North Island. This area had dryness last summer and even drought. It is an area we're going to have to watch for dryness once again this summer season. Back on screen we go. So, as we always do, once we get through sort of the headlines and give you the themes for the summer season, let's start off with a forecast funnel. We're going to start off with a smaller, forecast horizon the next 5, 6, 7 days, go to the next 5 weeks, then we'll go into detail the next 3 months, right? So, as I say, recording this on December 1st, so what can we expect for the opening days of summer? This is our good old friend, the pressure anomaly map. And when we give long-range outlooks, heck, when we give short-range forecasts too, anomalies are really helpful because that highlights where something unusual is forecast to occur. In this case, it's unusually high air pressure, which is the red, or unusually low air pressure, which is the blue. And I mentioned it is going to start off on a bit of a stormy note this summer season, with low pressure common across much of the New Zealand region. That's this blue. And as I play this through over the next couple of days, you'll see, as I zoom in too, on Wednesday, a pretty beefy low. Look, man, you don't get lows like this early in summer or summer at all. Usually low pressure is, in terms of barometric pressure, is a bit more profound during shoulder seasons or winter. Yes, sure. But during the summer season, we don't have usually the temperature difference, what we call baroclinicity, to help enable or facilitate strong low pressure. We got that, baby. And in fact, look at this. You can see we have the thermal gradient, the change in temperature over distance. This is showing, again, temperature anomaly, about 1,500 meters, about a mile above the ground-ish. You can see the blues over the Tasman Sea. You can see the reds over the North Island and to the east. And in between, you can see not much of a white spacing, which is no anomaly. This is telling us the temperature is going from unusually cool to unusually warm over a short distance, and that, my friend, is fueling the low pressure. So that will bring rain, thunderstorms, gusty wind. Look, Wednesday's going to be an active day, and there will be some really warm temperatures on the eastern part, particularly of the North Island. We could see temperatures this week once again approaching 30 degrees, especially up until Wednesday for the eastern part of especially the North Island, or exceeding 30 degrees. Once that low zips to the east, we're going to get some cooler air coming in behind that. And this is for Thursday, the 4th of December. It's not going to last that long. You can see it's a small region of blue across the country. Again, this is relative to a certain location's weather history. So a cooler than normal day or cooler than average day in Auckland is certainly different than a cooler than average day in Invercargill. I think we all can agree upon that, right? So it's relative to location. Either way you slice it, yeah, we're going to have some cooler temperatures Thursday, maybe Friday, but for the South Island, heck, by Thursday afternoon and certainly Friday, look at this. On Friday, we're warming back up, so a very short and sharp kind of puff of cooler air, but there's not going to be a lot of rain after that. Let's go to our ensemble model. One of my favorite things in the world is the ensemble model. And what we can do here is we can look at the odds for different scenarios in this particular example. So on the left-hand side of this is the first time you're seeing this. I'll disappear once again. On the left side, that is a dry scenario. If you are familiar with percentiles, we call this the 10th percentile. Now, on the far right is the wet scenario. Again, familiar with percentiles, we call this the 90th percentile. And in the middle, well, that's a middle-of-the-road scenario. You can see by late in the afternoon, let's bring this forward to say, just for grins and giggles, around sunrise Thursday morning, maybe just after sunrise, in fact. Now, with the wet scenario, a lot of rain is forecast for the North Island. Some places, if you look at that first tier of pink, that's our 50-millimeter threshold. You can see much of the North Island, in fact, bar, say, far northern Auckland and southern Northland, where I'm pointing to, gets at least 50 millimeters with some spots close to 100. That is a wet scenario, though. Unlikely to happen. Possible, but not probable. On the other side of the spectrum, we have the dry scenario where, not much in the way of pink, is there? We see some of that lighter, teal coloring, and that would certainly get us to 30 or 40 millimeters of rain. But the middle of the road, yeah, we do see a decent blend of that pink. So either way you slice it, it's probably the areas such as the central portion of the North Island, maybe into the Waikato, perhaps into far northern portions of Northland, that is likely to get the most rain. But it looks like eastern Taranaki, southwest Waikato, maybe the Manawatu, likely to see the most amount of rain. For the South Island, Look, either scenario is not a lot of rain. The wettest scenario, gosh, may barely give places like Otago and lower portions or southern portions of Canterbury 30, 40 millimeters of rain. But no, even the wet scenario, a lot of mid-Canterbury and eastern Canterbury does not get a lot of rain. And boy, if the dry scenario were to eventuate by, again, 6 a.m. Thursday, there'd be no rainfall. And if we let this play through to the end of the model coming back on screen, you can see that not a lot of rain happens after that because look, we go from Thursday in the morning, right? But you can see the colors don't change much. Yeah, a little bit maybe Saturday for the West Coast as I disappear. I'll do that one more time. I was covering that up. You can see perhaps Friday night into Saturday, a little bit of rain on the West Coast, perhaps another front bringing showers for that area. So the message is this, going back to our modeling here, once this low moves on by Tuesday night into Wednesday, there's not a lot of rain that is forecast to fall across much of the country. There'll be some rain, but this is kind of it for a good chunk of the country for probably several days. And then as we move through December 9th, so this is going into next week, you can see high pressure to the east. That favors warmth. You can see some blue here in the tropics. We're going to have to watch the tropics. There are some signs. We could see the tropics becoming more active, say end of week 1 into week 2. Now, odds are, even if something were to form up here in the tropics, it will not impact New Zealand. Always worth watching. The tropics, if something happens, forms, tropical low, tropical cyclone, it can have a mind of its own sometimes, as we used to say. But odds are it would stay to the east of the country, but it is worth keeping an eye on. But you will see plainly, we don't see a lot of blues on the map once we get through Wednesday on the 3rd of December. So there's Wednesday, just as a reference. And as we play this through, we certainly see more in the way of reds. Any blues are going to be well to the west and south. And guess what that promotes? Warm temperatures. So, yes, we will see a puff of cooler air. But it looks like this upcoming weekend, by the way, looking pretty good for much of the country if you want to get outdoors and enjoy the summer weather, because it will be looking pretty good. That's the early indication. Right. So what about beyond? Well, let's go to our 5-week outlook. This is NIWA 35. So we talked about the rain that will be impacting the country over the next few days, and this grabs it. So this is a 7-day forecast from the 29th of November. So this takes us to about the 6th of December, right? And yeah, it makes sense. We're going to find wetter than usual conditions where you see the green, and that is almost entirely due to the rainfall that we are expecting Tuesday night into Wednesday. What happens after that? Let's play it through. Week 2. Wow. Holy smokes. Did you see that? We go basically from one end of the spectrum to the other. Notice the North Island, below normal rain. And not just below normal. If you look at our color bar, that's like the second tier of brown. So well below normal rainfall. The west of the South Island, over towards Southland and western parts of the South Island, west of the Divide, likely to see some westerly winds. You can kind of get the airflow, can't you? Because it's forecast to be quite dry from mid-Canterbury, well, heck, pretty much all of Canterbury, right the way through to Marlborough, and in some instances, quite dry. We got to watch the fire risk, because whenever we're dry, if we have any wind, that does increase the odds for fire weather. You get high fire indices, so something to keep in mind. What about week 3? Let's play this through. So week 3, that dryness does go away. We could see a bit of wetness for eastern areas of both islands, but it's kind of flat. So maybe we get some showers. Maybe we get some rain week 3. Again, this is 7 days ending the 13th, so this will take us into the 20th. We're getting closer to Christmas, aren't we? You probably want to see the Christmas outlook, don't you? Well, heck, I do too. Right. So December 20th to the 27th. Again, this is the 7-day period from the 20th of December. So that takes us through Christmas and Boxing Day. Now, this is not our official Christmas outlook. Don't want to see that on Stuff or the Herald quite yet. We're not ready yet. All right. But if you're looking for themes, if you're looking for, hey, which direction are we going in? Looks dry for much of the country. Where you see the brown, that is where below normal rainfall for that week is predicted. Now, look, it's for the week, right? So this doesn't mean Christmas Day it'll be dry. There's different ways that we could get this sort of outcome. And keep in mind, below normal rainfall doesn't mean zero rainfall. It just means below normal, less than what is typical. But if you're hoping for a dry Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, this is certainly good news. This is a step. This is congruent with that, a step in that direction. There are some shades of green toward lower Aotearoa, coastal Aotearoa, but look, this is week 4. You take that with a big old pinch of salt. What about week 5? Well, that pinch of salt does get bigger, to be fair. But look, if you're looking for some indications, the dryness continues for much of the country. Now, look, we do see toward Tarafiti, Gisborne, maybe Hawke's Bay, some indications of rainfall, but this is pretty far out there. But what there is a pretty overwhelming theme for much of the country for dryness. So we are concerned that dryness will kick in across the country. And you can see with our New Zealand Drought Index outlook, boy, that's a mouthful. If there's going to be concerns for dryness, it's going to be in these areas of yellow. Now, listen, do not take these categories as gospel. They're guidance. Basically, we're highlighting if there's going to be issues with dryness, these are the areas that are most likely to see that dryness. Have a look at this. Let's look at current conditions as of late November, early December with our dryness. Here we go. Observations. Where'd it go? This doesn't. Here it is. This does not make for good. No, that's not. Where'd it go? Oh, it's down here, I think. I had my. No. Oh, it'll come. Where'd it go? There. Yes. Thank you for bearing with me. My apologies. So, where is it dry now? Well, you can see eastern Canterbury, right the way through, coastal Wairarapa, and certainly Hawke's Bay. In fact, if you zoom in pretty close, things have actually gotten a little bit better here. You can see that we are looking at dry to very dry, even some slivers of extremely dry conditions about coastal fringes of central and lower Hawke's Bay. This is an area we're going to have to watch because if that rain does not materialize as we work through December, as some of the NIWA 35 data showed you, we got to change that name. It's like we had a name for it. Tristan was telling me. I'll have to ask him again. But nonetheless, that long-range guidance that went out 5 weeks, there were some, let's show you for grins and giggles. You can see there were some days or some weeks where a bit of wetness was predicted. Again, that's week 5 and maybe week 4. But there are some weeks where there is wetness, and that would be a good thing. I really hope that materializes because if it doesn't, that would be quite unfortunate for that region. The dryness would frankly get worse. So we do have to watch for dryness in December, not only in Hawke's Bay, but for much of the country. The good news is that it's been quite wet for the upper North Island, so that'll buy us some time. Here's the thing, though, folks. When we're looking at rainfall, when we're seeing a lack of rainfall, like in week 2, week 4, week 5, keep in mind the sun angle. Look, it's December. The sun's pretty much at its apex, the highest it gets in the sky, from mid-December to like early mid-January. That is like the core of the sun intensity. And if you don't, like any budget, if you're spending more than you're making, you're going to go in deficit. So if we're not putting rain or moisture into the ground and we're stripping away potential evapotranspiration, PETs, we're stripping that away, you can see how we quickly go into deficit. And that spells dryness. And that can happen really fast. December, January, that sort of thing could happen quite fast. Things can, to use an expression from my birth country, change on a dime pretty quickly. Right. So that's the next 5 weeks. We got to watch for dryness emerging pretty quickly, a quick onset of dryness during the month of December into early January. I don't think early December. It would be as we get closer to Christmas and New Year's and thereafter. If dryness were to become a concern, it would happen probably toward the second half of December into early January. Right. So let's talk about La Niña. Can we? Of course we can. We're going into the weeds here. These are ocean temperatures, and I drew in our famous horseshoe. Now, that's a kind of a crummy horseshoe. You're probably thinking, Chris, it doesn't look like much of a horseshoe. And look, you would have a really strong case, no doubt about it. But I'll redraw it. That's a little bit of a horseshoe, isn't it? A little bit better. You can see ocean temperatures are much cooler than average across the central and equatorial Pacific, central and eastern equatorial Pacific. That is La Nina from an oceanic perspective. The atmosphere has caught up. The atmosphere is indicating precipitation patterns and pressure patterns that are consistent with La Nina. Then you may be wondering, why aren't we going to see these La Nina-like impacts? Why? Because we're not going to have a lot of east to northeast winds for the first half of summer. Now, I said we're not going to have a lot. That doesn't mean we're going to have zero. It just means when we have La Nina, history tells us east winds, northeast winds, they increase and westerlies decrease. What I'm telling you is that for December, perhaps even into early January, there's going to be an absence of that. The airflows are going to be incongruent with what typically is La Nina. Yes, there'll be some northeasterlies, of course, but it's going to be less than what would be typical of a La Nina year. And why is that? I'm going to go from oceans back to atmosphere. Stick with me, kids. So let's zoom back out. Remember we talked about what was going on over Antarctica, that SSW, sudden stratospheric warming? Well, that is still affecting our weather. That thing is really clingy and sticky in terms of impact. What that has caused, that rapid temperature change at the very tippy top of the atmosphere, that rapid increase in temperature relative to that part of the atmosphere, that has caused sea level pressure to be unusually high, where you see the red over the Antarctic continent. And because of that, that has displaced or pushed these lower sea level pressure areas away from it. And that is what caused our really windy October. These episodes of high wind and northwest winds and high temperatures, lower 30s in Hawke's Bay and Canterbury. Well, that is why. And that is going to persist. There's a long memory here, it seems like. That is likely going to persist through the month of December. So we're likely to see what I'm showing you, even though the map, or the clock, I should say, the calendar stops on December 11th, what I'm showing you here is likely to be a theme for much of December. And that theme is this, to put simply, a bit of a meteorological sandwich. So we'll have higher than usual air pressure, high latitudes over Antarctica. To the north, over the Southern Ocean, there'll be a zone of lower than normal air pressure, storminess basically, over the Southern Ocean. And that will move around, right? And to the north of that, we'll have this zone, maybe not quite as profound, but you see it right here, this zone of higher than usual air pressure. In this particular image, it's the 5th of December. But as I play it through, you can see how it kind of moves around a bit. That is likely to favor the North Island. And this is why we think December is going to be an outlier when it comes to airflow and rainfall patterns that are usually associated with La Nina, i.e., we're probably not going to see what we typically see with La Nina airflows. And keep in mind, rainfall patterns are pretty much joined at the hip with airflow patterns. So if you want a rainfall pattern to change, you got to change the airflow. And if you want the airflow to change, you got to change your pressure pattern, right? And it's these big things that happen so far away, like La Nina, like at the SSW over the southern pole, or the South Pole, the southern reaches over Antarctica, we'll just call it that. It's these things that happen at great distances that actually influence the pressure pattern, which influences the airflow pattern, which influences the rainfall pattern. So you can see the connection. And it's really understanding when these things change. Let's go back to the oceans and show you what to expect. Because I do want to talk about not only the oceans, but also, not only in the Pacific, I should say, but also closer to home. This is remarkable. So we're in mid-November on this image, right? 16th. And you can see, as I go to my telestrator, there certainly is above average SST, sea surface temperatures. We see that because you can see the orange and you can see the red. We both can see it, right? Now watch what happens. Holy smokes, look how quickly that increases. We are in marine heat wave conditions. Now, the technical, academic, purest definition is at least 5 consecutive days where the ocean temperature exceeds the 90th percentile. Remember 90th percentile with the ensemble modeling I showed you a little while ago? Basically, that's saying, look, 90% of the time, the values that's being shown here are not going to be exceeded. Pretty impressive. So this is severe these are significant to severe marine heat wave conditions. There's actually a category. It goes 1 to 5, 5 being the worst. And in some areas where I'm pointing to, there actually are category 5 marine heat wave status right in here. Let's zoom in. Northwest of the upper North Island in this region. Around our coastal waters, temperatures are unusually warm, 3, 4 degrees warmer than usual. Get a load of this. These temperatures are roughly 20, you don't see temperatures this warm typically in, say, late November, early December. These temperatures, as of Saturday, a few days ago, in the Firth of Thames and also across coastal waters, 20 or 21 degrees. Highly unusual. And why is that important, you ask? Because that will have an upward influence on our air temperatures. New Zealand, look, no, I'm stating the obvious. Call me Professor Obvious here. Look, we're surrounded by ocean. We are an island nation. We are joined at the hip with our ocean temperatures. If our ocean temperatures are running warmer than average, then our air temperatures are very likely going to be warmer than average. And guess what? This will mean more humidity. Warm ocean temperatures, particularly if they're warmer than usual, it makes it feel more humid. It will have an upward influence on temperatures, especially at night, which will increase the humidity, make it feel more uncomfortable. You're probably going to run the fan. If you have the aircon, you're going to run that, and your power bill will probably be higher than usual because you're burning more electricity to cool off. That'll be especially true for the North Island, but not limited to the North Island, but certainly the North Island, Bay of Plenty, Coromandel, Auckland, Northland. Those are the usual suspects. Waikato, that will have the greatest chance for those sorts of effects from the marine heat wave. Another facet we have to be concerned about, more water vapor. Look, that's why when you go to Fiji in July, when it's midwinter here, you go to Fiji and it's really warm and still kind of humid. That's because the ocean temperatures are really warm. It throws off humidity. It puts water vapor in the air. Water vapor is fuel for heavy rain. If there's more water vapor in the air, there is more fuel for heavy rain. So when we do get any rain-bearing systems coming from the north and west, like so, then guess what? They have to pass over and tap into that highly unusually warm water. So that does load the dice for big rain events. What we're thinking, going back to the atmosphere, is this. As we get, I'm trying to find an image that is more, I'll use this. Now look, work with me here. I know this reads December 9th. Let's just ignore that, right? It's just us here, just me and you. This type of pressure pattern we're looking at, where we see, let me zoom in a little bit here. I'll kind of tighten this up. There we go. Where we basically see high pressure favoring areas east and southeast of the country and low pressure favoring areas north and northwest of the country. That is a La Niña-like weather pattern. Something like this is more likely to occur in the second half of summer. If you recall, we talked about the two personalities of summer, particularly with the North Island, upper North Island, and maybe the eastern portion of the North Island, though there was uncertainty there. That can be linked back to the effects of that SSW wearing away and the impacts of La Niña coming back in. We're basically pivoting or passing the baton from one climate driver to another. So this is why, as we work through December, as we work through January, and especially into February, and even beyond potentially, just a heads up into early autumn, but as we work through that second half of summer, we think that is when the odds are greatest to finding more of those quintessential La Niña-like airflow patterns. And what drives airflow patterns? Pressure patterns. So the pressure pattern is going to be more conducive for those east to northeast winds, and that is high pressure to our east and southeast, low pressure to our north and northwest, and that brings those northeast airflows. So if we're going to get big rain events, of course they can happen anytime during summer, but if we're going to get big rain events that increase the odds for, say, things like flooding and landslips, they are more likely to happen in the second half of summer. The ex-tropical cyclone thing, can't forget about that. History tells us, northern New Zealand, we average about one ex-tropical cyclone a year. Now, as we know, an average is made up of things, of high-end and low-end years. So some years you make it 2 or 3, and other years you get the goose egg, 0. So that's an average. Most years we average about 1. This year we're expecting 1 to as many as 2. So we're describing the average as normal to elevated. So we have to keep that in mind. And it's the second half of the tropical cyclone season that historically is the most active, i.e. Feb, March, maybe even to early April. So to recap, what to expect this summer season and themes. Sorry about that. Here we go, starting with temperature, and I'm disappearing. Above average temperatures, if they're going to happen, they're most likely for the top of the country. Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Auckland, Northland, Coromandel. This region where you see right here, about a 2 in 3 chance for above average temperatures this summer season. 2 out of 3. 65% to be exact if you look at the tercile distribution on the document. Western and western North Island, upper South Island, they too have good chances for above average temperatures, just not quite as high. I think 55% chance for above average temperatures. Keep in mind, coming back on screen, there are 3 outcomes possible, not 2, 3. Above average, near average, below average. So we have to consider 3 outcomes. So if something has a 55% chance, that's profound, that's meaningful. Now, for the rest of the country, eastern North Island, as well as much of the South Island, east and west South Island, we think temperatures either average or above average. I think the South Island are going to find some cool snaps during December, and that may prevent or help prevent an above average summer, I should say. So, more days at the beach you're going to want to be spending, more humidity, more uncomfortable temperatures. And look, if you're like me, let's be honest, eating more ice cream, right? All right, what about the rainfall and just wrapping things up? We are concerned for dryness. Where you see the tan, that is where the 3-month rainfall. Again, this is a 3-month outlook, so a long period. We think there are chances for below normal rainfall. Western and lower North Island, we had dryness last summer. It's worth watching this summer. Thankfully, some rain coming in the short term, but that is likely not going to be a theme as we move forward after, say, the 3rd or the 4th of December. South Island, yeah, dryness a concern as well. Again, equal chances for normal or below normal. So it's not a slam dunk. It's not a guaranteed dryness happens where you see the gold or the tan. It's just that if it does happen, these are the areas that have the greatest risk. Now, for the upper North Island, once again, likely a dry start. December likely quite dry for some. Once we get through that period of wetness, 3rd, 4th of December, after that, the faucet goes down quite a bit, or the tap. I call it a faucet. It looks like we'll find, even though we'll find this dryness emerging for a good chunk of December, maybe early January. Once we get into later January and February, that's when that La Niña-like pattern may kick in and make up for some lost ground. We've got to watch out for those big rain events too, particularly at the upper North Island. And for the eastern North Island, look, a lot of uncertainty here, just conflicting signals. So we're thinking near normal rainfall, but to be honest, the odds for either dryness or wetness are about equal. So we're going to have to watch that area, and we'll certainly be updating things as we work through the next 3 months. Look, this is a dynamic. Outlooks are dynamic. They're not static. It isn't like we issue an outlook and then we're good for the next month. We're constantly looking at new information and updating things, and as we work through the next year, we're hoping to update you more frequently during the month, because as information becomes available, that does inform us, and it'd be great to pass that along. So just a heads up, we'll be looking to formalize that and include that over the coming months. That is me. I've talked way too long. Stu has a great job to edit this, so good luck, Stu. And if you want a complete read of the seasonal climate outlook, the summer season, just head to NIWA.co.nz or earthsciences.nz. You'll get there, no doubt about it. We'll see you next time. Enjoy the summer. Be safe. Ngā mihi nui.